Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Thanks so much for joining today's webinar, Carpe Diem, Why Redevelop Brownfields Now. My name is Lucy Bishop. I am the coordinator for this Redevelopment Trailblazers webinar. Before we dive in, I just wanted to give a few quick housekeeping notes. If you're having any trouble hearing us or notice an echo, please check your audio settings in the Zoom control panel. All attendees will be muted for the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions at any point, please use the Q&A panel to send questions to the speakers, and we will address the questions after the presentation. We may not get to everyone's questions live, but we will follow up with you individually if that's the case. This webinar is also being recorded, and it will be posted on the Redevelopment Trailblazers website. If you'd like a certificate of attendance for participating in this webinar, please send an email to info@redevelopmentinstitute.org. I'll also drop that email in the chat. Once again, thanks so much for being here, and I will now hand it off to Michael Taylor, the chair of the Redevelopment Institute.
Great, thanks so much. Just real quick, so everybody knows, and we'll do further introductions as we go. But I'm joined today with by Sarah Sieloff. She's going to talk about all the money that's coming out and how you can actually do something about these great trends that are occurring now. And then we have Kennedy Odell, who will talk about new legislation. It's her job to track it, push it, try to get it across the line. So you're going to get a little update about that, and then we'll have some questions. So we're really excited. I'm going to get going because we want to make sure there's plenty of time at the end. Even though folks are still joining, I think we ought to push ahead. Great. So I'm going to talk about some really exciting trends. I think, we all read the news and there's good and bad. And AI is definitely having an effect on the economy, et cetera. But we've got a number of things going on that I think we in the brownfield and land use communities need to be thinking ahead a little bit about. And in fact, we're probably a little behind, but life goes on. And these trends are all caveated by my this is something my grandmother used to say, if the Lord is willing and the creek don't rise. So, assuming we don't have World War III, America and the Brownfields movement is looking at an economic renaissance, and it's all about getting these sites ready. Next slide. So, if you're not aware of the history of manufacturing in the US, and I've worked now for 30 years in some of the most distressed communities in the country where industry is left, and the desolation that has followed. It's all been because of these actions. First NAFTA, and then allowing China into the WTO. So there's been a precipitous decline through 2010, and we think that things are looking up. The president and the White House say that we're looking at 9.6 trillion at this point of committed funds for manufacturing. And we're starting to see those land across the US. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Next slide. So these are some that we've tracked, commitments that have been made. The issue is obviously is Tim Cook from Apple says, yeah, we're going to spend 500 billion. That isn't the next minute. However, I was just down in Houston, and Foxconn and Apple are, some of that money is being spent now. The issue and that I think that I'm here to tell you all is that just because you don't see it coming out of the ground doesn't mean it's not coming. Yesterday or Wednesday, Eli Lilly, who had announced a very large development in the Houston area earlier in the year, has now announced a $6 billion pharmaceutical manufacturing investment in Huntsville, Alabama. So that's all part of reshoring pharmaceuticals. And there are a number of subcategories of pharmaceuticals that are just coming online, like biologics, that I think are going to add to that. But it's not just pharmaceuticals, it's all the industries are looking for ways to build in the US if it's at all possible. Next slide. This is just a little bit more on some of the investments that we're seeing. This did start with the CHIPS Act. So it's not just been since the Trump administration, but a couple years before. There have been a number of major microprocessor announcements, and many of those are already underway, et cetera. But the real point is what happens around these sites, and that's what I'm going to talk about in a minute. Next slide. So, you know, having worked in Toledo and Gary and Indianapolis and a number of these other communities, you can, if you look hard, you don't just see these burned out buildings and empty lots, et cetera. You see where the big facility was, and then you see the tool and die shops and the supply shops, and they're all empty, right, when the facility leaves, but they were there and they supported these large manufacturing facilities. Toledo is the Jeep, they had a large Jeep facility there. They've moved, instead of going to China, they just moved down the street, but they left a big donut hole in north central Toledo. And, all the suppliers were there, et cetera. And so as these new facilities come in, and we're talking manufacturing jobs of 1 to 4,000, that seems to be the number for these larger facilities. They require all these things. So we've helped shut down a couple of facilities. Thankfully, not too many, but a few. And when we do that, it might be 600 workers and 500 contractors, that work on the site every day. Some of these large chemical facilities and petrochemical, et cetera. So all of this stuff needs to come back, and there need to be places for it around these large facilities. I'm going to specifically talk about suppliers, but think workforce housing, think workforce development, think about infrastructure that will be needed or added to because of these facilities. And then, of course, all the folks who aren't the employees, but have to support these giant facilities, whether it's plumbing, electrical, carpentry, whatever it is. Next slide. So this is, I want Andy Mace, I see he's on. Andy, you can check my math later, but what I'm saying is that for every 4,000 manufacturing jobs, we need another 1,000 acres for suppliers, and that's all based on um, it's actually, if you get this book, it's actually based on some data sets, but that for every 100 manufacturing jobs, there are 289 supplier jobs created. And we can all chat about, do we need 1,200 square feet for every one of these suppliers, or more or less? But effectively, what I'm saying is, if you know that one of these facilities is coming to your area, you had better have another 1,000 acres underway, getting ready for those suppliers that are coming in. Now, I do know, working with the logistics folks, North Point is one of them, but just talking to Patatoni the other day, they have a number of facilities where they have space. So they're seeing a significant rise in smaller manufacturers, suppliers to those manufacturers in existing space. So some of this will get absorbed, but I happen to know that Micron, who went to Onondaga County, they had no supplier space, and the state has been pouring money into trying to set up set up sites to support that facility, which actually has been pushed off a little bit to 2030, maybe because this ecosystem wasn't really there when they selected this site. But this is what we need to be doing now is thinking through these issues and making sure that we're putting brownfield sites back into productive use. Next slide. Just a couple of examples that you see. Panasonic's doing electric motors in DeSoto, Kansas. I heard that Kennedy is from near there, so we'll get to hear from Kennedy a little bit later about DeSoto. But this was a big BRAC realignment site that Panasonic landed on. Now, thankfully, there was this big site that the government had set up, and so there was a place for them to go. Obviously, from what I understand, there's still a lot more semiconductors that are still made in Taiwan, but given the threats there, they're starting to look to the U.S. to continue manufacturing should there be problems there. Next slide. So a big market, and I think you're going to see more and more of this, is the defense tech industry. So there's been a lot of venture capital put into defense tech. This is the Anduril facility outside of Columbus. And what I like to say about this is, hey, this isn't a manufacturing facility. It is, but it's really an incubator, right? So as they create new tools to support America's defense system, and they take off, I know that the Palmer Luckey was over in Japan the other day, touting one of the new technologies that he has. You're going to see this leapfrog, and there will be other sites that they'll need. I think they have 1,000 workers here. They can accommodate up to 4,000, but I think this market, in a number of ways, is going to grow exponentially. Drones, autonomous planes, etc., autonomous subs. So I think you're going to see more of this. This is just one example. Next slide. So we all know data center stuff is the craze at the moment, and there are questions about how much has been announced will actually get built because we don't have enough power, we don't have enough grid, we don't have a stable grid, etc. I actually think that we're going to see a lot more power built in this country that will facilitate some of that and coming along with data centers. But the thing I wanted to say to folks is that if you have a large data center near you, many of these data centers, if not all, I don't know, I don't know enough about it, but they use this spoke and hub model where for redundancy purposes, for redundant calculations and other things, they'll have 4 or 5 smaller facilities within 200 to 300 miles of these hyperscale data centers. So, if you've got a site that connects to the grid that has a natural gas pipeline nearby, that's something to look at. Next slide. Just a little bit more on this. I assume people know that, yeah, the big hyperscale facilities are the ones attracting the news right now, but there are a lot of other data centers being considered and built. And the one I'm really interested in, I was just up in Cleveland um, with the Site Ready group. They are buying and repurposing brownfields at an incredible pace in the city of Cleveland. And there's room in buildings or in other secure spaces, smaller secure spaces for these edge data centers. And I saw a recent statistic that we have about 800 now, but by 2028 we're going to have another 1,000. So, you know, obviously you have to make sure that they aren't going to bother the neighbors, that you have enough water. Although I think they're ultimately going to solve this water issue. There are a number of technologies that are replacing water, but for now, it's a constraint for sure. Um, I think there are going to be some opportunities on brownfields for sure, for even these smaller facilities. Next slide. So just a little bit, cheering on small towns. I think, you know, the news focuses on, first tier cities, New York, Chicago, DC, um, wherever, LA. And but there's a lot of manufacturing that occurred in the past in rural communities. And they may be the best place for some of these facilities because there's stranded workforce there. There's land. In some cases, they have infrastructure. And this report by McKinsey, they spent a lot of money talking about what kinds of development might be best where. Now, it's just sort of a regional plot map, et cetera, looking at or categorizing the types of industries that might go where. But it's worth looking at. Hey, what might be good to try to attract to my community, et cetera. What does McKinsey have to say about that? So just keep it in mind, but I would certainly encourage small communities to be thinking about this. We've been to many small communities where there was one factory. That was the factory that kept the town going. It's now gone. I think we're in an era where the right community, with the support of some of the things Sarah's going to talk about, can attract new manufacturing jobs and rebuild that community. Next slide. So, listening to the site selectors, and they're my little scouts on the mountain, right? You read the Wall Street Journal on any given day, you have no idea whether anything good is going on or not, because there are good and bad things that go on every day. But the site selectors are saying they're busier than ever. And a big problem is available ready land. Next slide. So, just a few more facts, and they're calling it a manufacturing renaissance. Europe is particularly interested in getting into the US. We'll see what happens with the whole Mexico supply chain. Do they just stay down there and ship across the border and pay the tariff? We don't know. But Europe is definitely looking to get facilities in the US where there may be fewer regulatory problems, more. Several of the European countries are not replacing themselves from a population standpoint. So they're looking for labor, et cetera. But at any rate, there's a new report out about what the site selectors have to say. These are some of the points that come from that. Next slide. had my friend Dee Dee Caldwell, who's been doing this a long time and, goes to Europe frequently. And you can follow her on LinkedIn and she'll be talking about something important, had this to say. So this is what you guys, this is why we're having this webinar and we're talking to you all, is that we're hoping that you're doing this. And if you're not doing this, we're hoping that this is where you will turn your attention to getting these sites ready so that when a manufacturer comes along, it's a year or less to get them into that site. I will tell you that we're working with a small manufacturer, just 50,000 square feet, 60,000 square feet they're looking for, but they want to be in the building and operating by the fall or winter of 2026. And so I think you're going to see that. So it's a matter of getting good intel, it's a matter of getting funding, and it's a matter of you know, uh, uh, getting those sites ready so when they do come along, you can ink the deal and you can start going vertical. Next slide. Just 2 seconds. We've added a bunch of capabilities. We specialize in complex sites. Some of my friends are on the phone that, had 170 silos in the middle of town. What do we do with this? We help untangle these kinds of issues, refineries, old chemical plants, screwed up title, big giant buildings. How do we cut them up and reuse them, et cetera? But we've got a group of folks that are ready to take your phone call should you need some help with any of this. So I'd like to turn it over to Sarah. Sarah has done a great job preparing for this. We've known each other for a long time. She's a very careful thinker, and thankfully, we've been able to keep her interested in the Brownfield world. So, Sarah's an urban planner at the national firm Haley and Aldrich. She started her career in the federal government. Um, uh, and then spent 5 years running a nonprofit. And I will say, saved that nonprofit. It's now booming again, but she was the one who kind of stitched it all back together so that we've got another great technical assistance provider. And then she works in this field, and she's ready to help you bring the money, and she's going to talk about that now.
Thanks very much, Mike. And good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be with you. Thanks, Mike, for your comments. I think I'm going to talk about the why, not the how, of EPA Brownfields grants. So, in other words, I'm not going to focus on how to write a competitive proposal. There are many other resources available to help you with that. I'm happy to talk about it offline. But in what follows, I want to discuss how today's funding or currently available funding relates to the problems and the opportunities that Mike just discussed. We know there's a demand for manufacturing sites across the US. We know supply is limited. Brownfields are the obvious answer, and it's the most wonderful time of the year, meaning that grant money is available and you can bring some of it home to your project. So, without further ado, Carpe Diem nam audentes fortuna juvat. I get to show off my 3 years of high school Latin. Seize the day because fortune favors the bold. Let's talk in greater detail about how EPA's available brownfields funding can help move these sites forward. Next slide, please. So, just very briefly, EPA is currently seeking applications for $255 million worth of brownfields funding. It comes in many flavors, as you can see here, and the due date for all applications is January 28th of 2026. So if you have questions about how to put together an application, a really good resource is your regional tab provider, your technical assistance brownfields communities provider. And I've got links to all their webinars. Again, Mike and I are always happy to talk offline as well. I do want to note that these grants are available to public and nonprofit sector entities, but private sector entities can still very much benefit from this funding. Lucy's just, I believe, put into the chat a link to an article that gets at that and shares an example. What I really want to highlight here is that in addition to this funding being available, this is the last year we're going to see historically large brownfields grants. The program is going to continue, but after this, grants are going to get smaller and there will be fewer of them. So let's give that a little bit more context. Next slide, please. All right. So why is this year so significant after all? Congress can appropriate up to $200 million to support competitive EPA brownfields grants and up to $50 million for state and tribal formula grants in any given year. Historically, they've actually appropriated much less. From about 2003, appropriations were pretty constant at around 90 million a year for the competitive grants. Those are the ones I was just talking about. And at about 47 million a year for the state and tribal formula grants, which do everything from give states some money to support site assessments to help pay for staff. And so that was the state of things, right? Until along came the bipartisan infrastructure law, also known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and that roughly tripled available brownfields funding. So it provided a total of $1.5 billion for the brownfields program from fiscal year 22 to 26. And that was about a $240 million bump each year for competitive grants alone. So really, really big deal. If you're in this space and you deal with this funding, life has been pretty good since 2022. But this is the last year we're going to see that increase because all of the bipartisan infrastructure law money has to, by law, be obligated by September 30th of 2026. So the clock is ticking. And again, the Brownfields program has existed since 1995, will absolutely continue to exist, but this is your last chance to take a bite of a really big apple. So bear that in mind. Next slide, please. So these grants can fund a variety of different parts of the brownfields redevelopment process, right? Broadly speaking, assessment can take you all the way from inventory through phase 1 and phase 2 site assessments into cleanup and reuse planning. Cleanup grants can often pay for some cleanup planning, but mostly they pay for cleanup. The key thing here is that they don't really pay for redevelopment, right? And that's kind of interesting. Let's go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, this program has been around since the mid-90s. And why? Why is it a bipartisan favorite? Well, the secret is that the Brownfields program is not really an environmental program. It's a redevelopment program. Yes, it has positive environmental outcomes, absolutely. But the environmental work is a means to a redevelopment end. And as I mentioned, ironically, the thing about these brownfields grants is that they don't actually get you to redevelopment. They don't pay to bring anything vertical out of the ground. And EPA knows that. These grants get you through the assessment and the cleanup portion. And after that, you're on your own to go find the money and the partners to help you go the rest of the way. So it's a little bit of a valley of death scenario. You have to cross it, but how? And the answer is you can use these brownfields grants to conduct planning exercises, and you can use that planning to generate redevelopment momentum. So planning is your bridge. And a key thing to remember in this case is that you don't have to know all the details about your site's eventual redevelopment to apply for this funding. You just have to know what could be possible and be able to articulate how you can use EPA's funding to get closer to that goal. So that story might look a little different depending on whether you're a local government applying for funds or whether you're a private sector partner who wants to benefit from these grants and team up with a local government. But these are some really key things to remember. And so I just, on that note, Mike, can you come back online? Because I have a question for you. I know we have a couple of developers in the audience, but I just want to verify developers totally love uncertainty, right? Can't get enough of that wonderful stuff.
Well, it depends if the price is right, right?
Indeed.
But yes, that's uncertainty which they can sort out
Hmm.
allows them to come in at a low basis, which is key really for profitability on sites. I know everybody likes to drive up the price of sites and the price of land and that sort of thing, but those are the sites that 3 years later, they're reselling because they paid too much for it. So
Mhm.
yeah, they do love uncertainty because they're experts at unraveling uncertainty. So
Right. But it's got to be like the right kind of uncertainty. And to your point, right, the price has to be right. So, I mean, what I wanted to highlight here, and we'll get to this in detail later, is that really, I mean, the environmental work that you do under these grants is key to reducing uncertainty because you can better understand, is there contamination? If so, where, how much? What's it going to cost to clean it up? But I think the planning, one can make an argument that planning also helps reduce uncertainty. And this is really key in terms of crossing that valley and getting you from these grants to redevelopment. Planning is really the glue that holds it all together. So let's go to the next slide. So how can you plan under a Brownfields grant? Well, EPA really wants you to plan. If you're applying for an assessment grant, they want to see 30% of your budget directed at planning. So hint, if you're applying, good thing to shape your budget accordingly. This is actually in the evaluation criteria section of the Notice of Funding Opportunity. And planning can take place at any different part along the continuum as you're redeveloping these sites. The dollars are flexible, so they can be used to answer questions like what's the highest and best use for a site? What would be economically feasible? Maybe you need a market study, maybe you need an evaluation of market viability. Perhaps you want to conduct some area-wide plans to better organize a local government's approach to addressing multiple brownfields in a given area. What about infrastructure evaluation? What do we have? What do we need? What's it going to take in order to facilitate redevelopment? How much is this going to cost a local government? Fiscal impact analysis. How much bang do we get for our buck? Economic impact analysis. All of these different things are possible under a Brownfields grant. And these elements can be really useful, especially for grantees who are in conversation with private entities, with developers, right? To learn more about any of these exercises, I would encourage you to go to this link highlighted in yellow. These are fact sheets developed by the Redevelopment Institute. That's Mike and his team. They're a great resource. And so whether you are on the applicant side as a public sector group,
hey,
or
hey,
go
hey,
for it.
Sarah, sorry.
Mhm.
Vita Nova did this under subcontract to EMS, who was on the phone. Great small contractor, government contractor. Abe is here today, but yeah, we did it as Vita Nova
Mhm.
for US EPA under a subcontract to EMS. Just
Gotcha.
got to keep all that straight, right?
Thank you. No, this is very true. I think the fact sheets, though, they're a fantastic resource. So, again, good for applicants. Also, if you're a private sector entity that's trying to understand how your work with a local government or excuse me, how you can work with a local government to benefit from some of these grants, take a look just so you're familiar with the language that's being used and the way that these concepts are being presented within the context of the Brownfields grant program. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, planning under a Brownfields grant can really help facilitate private investment when it's done right, right? Mike and I talked before about how this, to a certain degree can help reduce some uncertainty. You can use plans to realign your reuse vision with existing plans, identify funding needs and resources. Importantly, reduce uncertainty by clarifying local preferences and expectations so everybody can be on the same page from the beginning. Engage the public. That can also help mitigate potential opposition down the road. Really important, really critical. And then finally, some of these planning exercises can help begin a conversation about public-private partnerships. What could this look like on a given site? Who needs to bring what to the table to make it work? And the important thing is that these Brownfields grants are flexible, and they are a really great way to start the ball rolling. Let's go to the next slide. I'm not going to touch on this in great detail, but I just want to say that if you are thinking about applying and you have been concerned about the degree to which the guidelines might have changed in this particular year, I will just say that I don't think that the changes are really radical. There's been a movement away from environmental justice and toward talking about economic distress and disproportionate environmental impacts. I think that the two of those are not the same, but very closely related in many ways. There's not a discussion of climate change, but there is a priority to use redevelopment to improve resilience to extreme weather. And finally, energy efficiency and renewable energy production continue to be priorities that EPA would like to see reflected in potential reuse plans, as well as open space and parks. So again, don't let this throw you. It is entirely manageable. Just tell the best story that you can within the bounds of EPA's guidelines. Next slide, please. So if you're thinking about applying and you're still not sure, I just want to underscore that help is available. Mike and I are happy to talk with you. The tab providers are a great resource. Again, after this year, it's the grants will still be around, but for those of us who have been working in this program for a long time, we're going to go back to the dark days of smaller awards and fewer of them. So really consider making a run at this funding. And finally, if you're not sure where to start, assessment grants are a really accessible place. To tell a good story in an assessment application, you need to know your priority sites, know who your partners could be, and have a good idea of your needs and your goals. And from there, you can put together a compelling application. It is possible. So don't take it from me. Cicero nailed it, continuing with our Latin theme. Cicero nailed it more than 2,000 years ago. And just do recall that if you are a private entity that's listening to this conversation, you're not directly eligible to receive this funding, but you can still very much benefit from it. So please consider taking this information to your local government and starting a conversation. Let's go to the next slide, please. So with that, I want to tie it all together and tell a bit of a story. And so I'm going to ask Mike to comment at a couple different points because this is a site that Mike worked on. It's a Brownfields-led redevelopment story, and I do want to give special thanks to Luis Nieves Ruiz, who is the Economic Development Director for the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council, for sharing his perspective on this important example with me. And apologies to Luis because I'm going to summarize in 3 slides what his team has been doing over 3 years. So, as many of you are no doubt aware, once upon a time in Florida, say the 1960s, developers started buying large tracts of land, platting them for single-family homes, and selling those lots. And that's how we get the compound. So the compound covers 2.8 square miles. It's really big. It has over 5,000 lots, about half as many property owners, and most of the lots are small. Mike, what else would you add?
Only that it was marketed around the world so that some of the owners are from Argentina, the south of France. The owners are from everywhere
Mhm.
of these poor little sites that are because the infrastructure did not extend to this area. This is stranded land, and this is what we were given when we were asked to look at this as part of an EPA technical assistance project.
Mhm. Yeah, and it is interesting, right? There are some things that kind of pass as roads, but they're pretty rudimentary. Luis was telling me that it's not the kind of place where you would want to go without a truck with 4-wheel drive. And so, and the road network alone, by the way, is 200 miles. So it's just hard to get your head around the scale of this thing. And the compound's a big problem, and that's why it sat for 30 years until the city of Palm Bay and their colleagues at the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council dug in and started building momentum toward redevelopment with help from a Brownfields grant. The other thing that I should note here is that, of course, the developer walked away in 1991, and because this site sat, I mean, the safety concerns are really hard to overstate, right? We're talking about a lot of crime concerns, also dumping, not just dumping of tires and garbage, but dumping of drums with chemicals. So you get the idea. This site is really a big liability for the local government and could be doing a lot more. So, Mike, pop quiz: how do you eat an elephant?
Right. And that was the question. So I think the next slides
Yeah.
will help us to do that. But the key in a situation like this is, are there any large parcels that we could start with?
Hmm.
Are there ways to get to those parcels? And is there site control? And so in our evaluation, that's what we began to look at was were they were there large sites? Could we get site control, and were they accessible?
Bingo. Let's go to the next slide. We're going to dig into that more. So you eat the elephant one bite at a time, right? And as Mike pointed out, you're not going to solve the whole problem of the compound in one stroke. This is the ownership map. So you can see it is quite broken up, but up here in the northern part, there are some larger parcels. And that turns out to be huge because it turns out that 25 to 50 acre industrial sites are rare especially in the surrounding area. Some would say across the state of Florida. So to have them here in the compound, right, and to have a few that were owned by the city of Palm Bay really made the difference. And the thing about Palm Bay is that it's proximate to the Space Coast, right? So we're talking about a big aerospace cluster, big demand for these industrial parcels. So, I mean, Mike, as you mentioned, Luis was telling me yesterday that the vision really became how do we master plan an employment center with some adjoining natural space that could leverage an existing research facility that had already been built nearby, and take advantage of the compound's remote location. Because if you're going to do aerospace testing, you got to keep the neighbors happy, and that's an activity that doesn't tend to go so well with neighbors.
And I think just to state the obvious, this is an example of what I was talking about. You all need to be doing around these large facilities that are coming in. Obviously, the Space Coast has been there for a while, but there's a lot of renewed interest with Elon Musk down there and others, and they're, up on the coast. There's a dearth of land, and this is what led to what we ultimately ended up with down there. But let's go through it and we'll talk more.
For sure. And let me just say one more thing, which is that so the East Central Florida Regional Planning Commission partnered up with the city and did some strategic planning around, the potential reuse of these big northern parcels for industrial use. And so they had already done a fair amount of kind of high level conceptual laying of groundwork. And then they went out and got themselves a Brownfields grant. So the Regional Planning Coalition won $1.5 million from EPA in 2024 for this assessment grant, and they cited the compound as one of their priority sites. So let's go to the last slide. All right. So they used that money to conduct a series of phase ones. And they targeted those phase ones at some of those key city-owned larger parcels in the north that they thought they could unlock for industrial development and that had also been impacted by illegal dumping. And as I mentioned, we're not talking about run-of-the-mill illegal dumping. There's some pretty hairy, scary stuff that had been going on there for a very long time. And this is one of those anticlimactic but happy brownfield stories where it turns out that the phase ones came back with no recognized environmental conditions, no red flags. So very boring, what we like to see, but they needed to have that level of certainty, right? They used the grant to reduce uncertainty, and it allowed them to move ahead with their redevelopment plans. And along the way, they applied for and were awarded $100,000 of EPA land revitalization technical assistance. Again, we tend to focus on grants, but the technical assistance is a really valuable tool, and it helps you leverage your grant dollars and take them further. And that developed the redevelopment action plan that you see here with a financial analysis and jobs estimate. And so that helped clarify that under some assumptions about redevelopment, 2,500 jobs could be created at that northern part of the compound and generate $2 million a year in property tax revenue. I mean, Mike, this is really, you've got your fingerprints all over this. What more would you add?
Only to say that this would be an R&D industrial flex site in support of the Space Coast. There wasn't great roadway network, so we're not talking logistics or a lot of trucks, but more one of the things with space manufacturing is they like those giant 60, 80, 100-foot clearance, buildings, et cetera, where they can pick things up by cranes and test them and play with them. And this would be a perfect site to do all that. Bombardier, which I think has changed their name, but they were doing jet ski testing just north, because it was secluded. So you take advantage of the attributes that the site has for the new use. And, obviously there's a market, people are interested. And so the way that you would move forward with this is, hey, we've got this great secluded site. Yeah, it's a couple miles off the highway, but you can do a lot of things here. There's a lot of land here.
Mhm.
And so I think you make it into a multi-use compound for manufacturing and R&D associated with the Space
Mhm.
Coast. And that's the direction they're heading. I think they'll be successful. And, this is what we need to do on sites across America
Mhm.
because people are looking. And I think that's the bottom line that we're hearing from the site selectors is they're getting calls every day. I need 1 million square feet. I need 250,000 square feet. Where do I look?
Mhm.
So we can do another webinar on what you should do to prepare your community for those phone calls. But I think we need to get on to Kennedy.
We do, yes. So I will just say that the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council's next step is to use this work product from Mike and his group to conduct an economic impact analysis that will help support the City of Palm Bay's pursuit of additional state and federal funds to help with things like infrastructure upgrades and other items that would be necessary to prepare that northern part, that first bite of the elephant, for industrial redevelopment and give them a toehold and some momentum. So if redeveloping the compound were easy, somebody would have done it by now. But I think this is a great story about how brownfield funding can really help generate something where before you didn't have anything. Next slide, please, Lucy. All right, so I just want to introduce Kennedy Odell. Kennedy, can you come online? Kennedy is the Director of Advocacy at Smart Growth America. Kennedy, we're so pleased to have you with us. She leads advocacy and policy strategy on housing and economic development issues for a membership group of smart growth-oriented developers and for the National Brownfields Coalition. And her prior experience includes time on the Hill as a Senate staffer and a research associate. She is a local economic development maven. So Kennedy is our respondent. And Kennedy, the floor is yours. Thanks again.
Thanks so much, Sarah, for that lovely introduction. Yes, so as Sarah said, I'm the advocacy director for the National Brownfields Coalition, which is a nonpartisan alliance of public, private, and nonprofit practitioners who develop and advocate for federal policies and practices that promote the cleanup and remediation of brownfields. Um, we educate, advocate, and convene folks around core brownfields issues. And I do have sort of revitalization near and dear to my heart. As Mike mentioned, my hometown of Eudora was rivals with the DeSoto Wildcats, which is the site of the Panasonic plant. So local connection there. But as we've been working through Brownfields policy, we see three clear priorities. We know that there are many streams of funding and policy issues that impact brownfields, but these are sort of the big three. So the first is brownfields reauthorization, which is a sort of cyclical update process for EPA's brownfields program. The last functional reauthorization was the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Reauthorizations are a chance to tweak grant thresholds, requirements, match rates, etc. And so that as we're getting towards the fifth year out from that, there's a need to do that again and sort of engage in the cyclical process again. We are excited because there's been good bipartisan, bicameral support for the process, although it's recently hit some bumps, and we are aware that negotiations have sort of stalled. So we've been meeting with folks in the House and the Senate who are working on these reauthorization bills. Senator Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia has been an excellent champion. Her committee unanimously passed a Brownfields reauthorization bill in February, which was a great sign. To do that early with that much consensus at the start of a Congress was great, but the House has to have their say. So why we care about reauthorization is that it is a chance for Congress to express robust support for brownfields. In a dynamic administrative environment, that bipartisan, bicameral support for the program is essential. So we drafted a series of detailed recommendations around adjusting grant maximums, and making a number of other sort of administrative tweaks to the program, or such as allowing a certain share of funds to be used for demolition. But as we've been engaging, we've sort of realized that broadly opening up the program may invite some edits that could potentially undercut or redirect resources away from core brownfields functions. So to that end, we have three core objectives at this point on reauthorization. One, get passage of a bipartisan bill that doesn't significantly undermine the efficacy of the programs. Two, get as high of a funding level authorization as politically possible. And three, clearly address and remove the 5% administrative cap on grants so that folks can use a bit more for administrative expenses. There's a difference between authorization and appropriations that I want to dig in there, which is to say that the IIJA was unique in that it did the infrastructure law, the previous reauthorization, it provided advanced appropriations. Those, as Sarah pointed out, will be expiring, creating a huge funding cliff. So it's important that we get a high authorization number in this bill, just sort of like a stated objective funding level. We aren't going to get in this political environment anywhere near that level of robust advanced appropriations for the next 5 years. And so we're trying to find ways to problem solve through the appropriations process. In terms of appropriations, we want as much funding as we can get for this program, cognizant of the coming funding cliff. The way yearly appropriations works, Sarah's graph showed you, here's the top bars were those advanced appropriations, and then there was the smaller pots beneath it. Year to year appropriators will sometimes increase you 5%, decrease you 5%, but they rarely, if ever, double your funding appropriation. And we'd need significantly more than that to cover the gap, that the sort of funding cliff that we're coming out of as the IIJA expires. So we've been advocating and starting to educate folks about that cliff and what it will mean for brownfields. We know that there's more applications for the existing amount of funding than they can fund, showing the sort of urgency and the need for this work and the massive scope. And we think, given what Mike and Sarah have been talking about, it will only increase the need for brownfields, sort of first in money assessment and revitalization funding will only increase with time. And we need that in order to achieve our manufacturing goals. On year-to-year appropriations, we are currently part of a suite of programs that are funded through January 30th at previous funding levels. There could be another shutdown, but the political pressure seems like that's unlikely. But we don't know yet what our funding for the sort of yearly appropriations will be. But we're cautiously optimistic. The last piece of policy, it's a core priority for the coalition, and we think should be for anyone who's focused on brownfield revitalization and remediation, is the restoration of the federal brownfields cleanup tax deduction. That deduction was high impact. It existed from 1997 to 2012, and it allowed folks to fully deduct the cleanup costs of contaminated property in the year that they were incurred. And by allowing for the expensing of remediation costs, the deduction makes contaminated sites far more competitive to develop. We also think that this is a strong move because it would bring parity between the folks who currently folks who cause the pollution are eligible to fully deduct the cost to clean up, while so-called volunteers or redevelopers have to spread it out into the future. So we think it'd bring parity, and it would really help bring more of this land back into productive use. There are two bills that do that, HR 815 and HR 5472, and we're excited to be working with those offices on those pieces of legislation. But I think my big takeaway here is that we've got some funding problems coming for us. That's sort of my negative view. I think the pot is going to shrink of money to do this critical work. And so it's really important that folks be advocating to express support for reauthorization and to express support for robust funding levels with their members of Congress, because otherwise we're going to be working with very limited resources to do an increasingly large amount of work. So
let me jump in there, Kennedy. So we are a member of this coalition. Kennedy's doing a fabulous job. There are really just a small number of companies engaged. It's not very expensive to support this work, but I would say that if you're a company that is benefiting from this work, joining the coalition, working with Kennedy, she'll get you in front of the right people at Congress. She'll tell you what's happening today so that you can advocate. I would like to encourage you all to consider joining, and you can reach out directly to her, or I can get you the right spot. But I've really appreciated getting to know her and seeing the work that she's doing, which I have no ability to do, but I'm happy to cheer her on.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. We really need the expertise of the industry, and that's our X factor is our ability to give nuanced, detailed policy recommendations based on practical experience. And it's really fun to watch folks from the most urban settings like New York City talk to folks who are working in West Virginia and hash out what the projects are. And we really do value everyone from private to the traditional public members. It's been really valuable.
Awesome. Thanks, Kennedy, and thank you, Sarah and Mike, for sharing all of your wonderful insights and insider knowledge. That was super interesting. We would love to open up the floor in these last 3 minutes to questions and comments from you all. You can submit questions and comments in the Q&A panel. And yeah, let us know if you're having any problems. Also, let us know if you would like to make a comment live, and I can unmute you.
And Lucy, one quick request. Would you mind putting the link to the National Brownfields Coalition that Kennedy shared out to the whole group of attendees?
Yes,
Thank you so much.
I will do that.
Thanks, Lucy. Thanks, Sarah.
Yes, of course.
Great.
Okay.
No questions? Everybody happy?
Gonna go home and bring home lots of EPA Brownfields
Oh,
dollars to the community.
we have a
Yeah,
hand
if people
raised.
don't start asking questions, then I'm gonna have to start talking about China, and you don't want me to do that.
We have a hand.
Luis, I am going to unmute you. Okay, you should be unmuted now.
Hi, Lucy. Thank you. And thank you everyone for all the work today. I just want to let you know the chat is disabled right now. So I'm not sure if members of the call were trying to put their questions in the chat. It's an opportunity to just enable it. As I was going to, I wanted just to put my contact information if there are any questions.
Okay. Great. And
Thank you.
Luis, what we can do is since we're kind of right up against time, we could share your information in a post-webinar email as well. Yeah.
No, that's
Thank
great.
you.
That's fantastic.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you again. Luis is is one of the brains behind the effort at the compound. So he is a Brownfields treasure.
Lucy, are we able to solve that problem?
We are still working on it, but like I said, we're being intentional and trying to use our resources. We just entered the second year of our grant, so we definitely have 3 more years to make more of an impact within Palm Bay and within the compound.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, hopefully people can comment now. Or if you cannot, please just raise your hand and we'll go ahead and unmute you.
Oops.
Hearing
Okay,
crickets,
well,
I
we're at 1 o'clock, so feel free to reach out individually. We are at a very pregnant moment in this country. We've got a lot of investment promised. We've got a lot of companies looking, but the question is really going to be, can they satisfy all the needs that are required for manufacturing to land here in the US? But I think it's our best opportunity. I've been Vita Nuova started in '98. I would say to you, we have the best opportunity to redevelop brownfields that we've had during that time. So thank you all.
You heard
Keep
it
up
here
the good
first.
work and let us know if there's anything we can do to help.
Thanks very much, everybody. And thank you, Kennedy and Lucy.
thank you.
Have a good rest of your Friday.